So, I'm a daughter of the King. I'm recovering from anger, control, and codependency. My name is Angel.
Angela.
So, I want a quick recap denial because that is the lesson that the step study groups should be working on this week. Or you'll be working on this next week.
Next week.
Next week?
Next week.
Well, no, we should be going over
Okay,
denial on.
you've already done it.
Nobody started.
Okay.
Yeah, we
So
will.
for those of you that are just working on denial, I want to just recap real quick the acrostic for you.
I'm actually really good at it.
Denial? Yeah, it's something I'm pretty good at too. And I've said all that. Yeah.
Anybody else want a note sheet?
Do you want to take notes? Let Dale know you can bring you one. So to recap, denial disables our feelings. If we're not acknowledging that something's wrong, well, we're certainly not experiencing the feelings that go along with it, right? Energy loss. Do you ever get exhausted trying to avoid the thing? That's kind of what happens. Negates growth. Have you ever tried to grow and develop when you can't even acknowledge that you have an issue? You can't grow if you're not addressing your junk, right? Isolates us from God. Have you ever wanted to sit down and have a warm, fuzzy discussion with God when you're wrapped up in your junk? Usually we try to avoid it because of guilt and shame, right? So remaining in denial will just further isolate us from God. Alienates us from our relationships. If we're in denial about being a doormat, we're probably not going to be super social creatures. If we're in denial about any issue in our life that's going to impact our relationships. And the last on that is lengthens the pain. By staying in denial, all we're doing is continue to wallow in our misery. We're not going to get better if we can't acknowledge that there's an issue. So just a quick recap on that. So tonight is lesson 2, Powerless. Principle 1, realize I'm not God. I admit that I'm powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing, that my life is unmanageable. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor, Matthew 5:3. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors and that our lives had become unmanageable. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is in my sinful nature, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out, Romans 7:18. I was thinking about the lesson tonight throughout the day and on the way here, and I kept replaying an event that happened, I don't know, like a month or two ago. I kept replaying in my head, and I kept thinking, what in the world does that have to do with the lesson? like, I'm trying to focus on the lesson here, and I keep thinking about this dumb thing that happened, and I'm not putting the pieces together. I could not connect the dots, but it keeps coming to the forefront of my mind, so I'm going to share it, and maybe at some point the dots will connect. Maybe at least for you guys. So, as I'm looking at principle 1 and step 1, and kind of recapping denial, I'm thinking that, we talk about there's no arrival. We do recovery knowing that we're never going to arrive. It's not a destination. It's a journey that we're going to be on our entire lives. Anyone that comes to you and says, I'm a Christian, and I've got it all together, I have no sin in my life, I'm spiritually mature, I've arrived. Maybe not look to them for advice because they're in denial, okay? We all have stuff, and that's not going to change as long as we're on this earth. Now, we can have different levels of stuff. We can have different levels of where we are in our relationship and our self-awareness and all that. And so that's something to think about, whether you're starting a step study, whether you're new to CR, whether you're just now thinking about making some life changes. You're never going to get to a perfect place where you have it all together, and be okay with being okay with that. Be okay with, I may not be where I hoped I would be, but I'm not where I was last year, last month, last week, right? So I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that's in my sinful nature. That's talking about our flesh nature, right? The good itself that lives in us comes from our relationship with God and our acknowledgement, our ability to get out of denial and recognize that we need salvation, we need Jesus, we need a relationship with God, right? So back to powerless. There are certain things in life that we have power over and certain things that we don't. We don't have power over what other people say, think, or do. We have power over what we say, think, or do. And sometimes that power is dependent upon how honest we're able to be with ourselves. Do you agree with that? Who thinks that their decision-making ability has improved since getting into recovery? Mine certainly has. So let's see. Stop denying the pain. That's the first thing that we're going to talk about. This is not the acrostic yet, but I'll get there. Stop denying the pain. We said that our denial had at least 6 negative effects, and so we're going to recap those real quick before we get into the acrostic, okay? Stop denying the pain. It disables our feelings, wastes our energy, negates our growth, isolates us from God, and alienates us in our relationships and lengthens our pain. Psalm 6, 2 and 3. David talks about a time when he came to the end of his emotional and physical resources. So he had reached his bottom. David had reached his bottom. Pity me, O Lord, for I'm weak. Heal me, for my body is sick and I'm upset and disturbed. My mind is filled with apprehension and with gloom. When David's pain finally surpassed his fear, he was able to face his denial and feel the reality of his pain. His pain surpassed his fear. It's not an easy thing to acknowledge if we have something we need to work on. The Bible says that David was a man after God's own heart. So we can take from that God loved David, that he saw in David something from himself, right? He could look at David and see part of himself in David. That was because he was a warrior and a worshiper. He did not worry about what people thought when he chose to worship. He was not worried about, oh, somebody's going to think I'm a nerd if I raise my hands, or, oh, I don't want to get too excited, people might think I'm weird. He wasn't worried about what people thought. He worshiped. What's the word I'm looking for? He was exorbitant. He was outgoing. And he was a warrior. If you look back in the Bible, especially through the Old Testament, you see that God did not like weaklings. He did not look favorably upon people who were weak or fearful or unable to carry out the things that needed to be done. Does that seem weird? But God respects people who are willing to fight for what's important. Anyway, I digress. Stop playing God. You are either going to serve God or you're going to serve yourself. Part of serving God means that you have to step out of denial and you have to acknowledge your powerlessness. Start admitting our powerlessness. The lust of power is not rooted in our strengths but in our weaknesses. Have you ever noticed that the people who are least equipped to have power usually have power? I mean, in the church and things like that, hopefully we're seeing more people in positions of leadership that have not just the call to be there, but have their issues in check to be able to be positive in their leadership, right? But I mean, we can click on the news and see that there are people in positions of power that have no business being in positions of power because it's rooted in their weakness. Their lust for power is coming from a place of weakness and sin, not from a love of God, right? I mean, if you rolled up to the White House, do you think you'd see them in there reading the Bible and talking about God? Probably not. And I could feel like I could safely say that about any administration we've ever had, at least as long as I've been alive. So, start admitting your powerlessness. We need to realize our human weaknesses and quit trying to do it by ourselves. That is what it really all boils down to when we're talking about recovery. I mean, is there anyone here that doesn't struggle with control in some way, shape, or form? I mean, I do. I have control issues, for sure. With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Matthew 19:26. We need to admit that we're powerless to turn our lives over to God. That's why Jesus said that in Matthew 19:26. It's impossible. You're not going to make whatever progress that you want to make without involving God in that. Start admitting that our lives have become unmanageable. At what point has your life become unmanageable? At what point did it occur to you that your life was unmanageable? Was it a certain thing that happened? Was it something that was slowly progressive and a little bit at a time you realized, wow, my life's not really manageable? However it happened, unless we can acknowledge that things are unmanageable and then make that change, nothing's going to change. It's an admission that we finally realize we're out of control and are powerless to do anything on our own. That's when change happens. Problems far too big for me to solve are piled higher than my head. This is coming from David in Psalm 40:12. Meanwhile, my sins, too many to count, have all caught up with me, and I'm ashamed to look up. So I mentioned earlier that there was this thing that happened that kept coming back to me and replaying over and over when I was trying to focus on something really good to share in the lesson. I just wouldn't stop. So the thing was, I have my little Spotify playlist, and I have all my favorite songs on my playlist, songs that I like. They're a variety of different songs. There might be a heavy metal song, or a country song, or some other genre of music. It's just a big blob of music that I like. And it's not a Christian playlist, but nothing on that playlist sucks me back into my party days or anything like that. There's nothing triggering on my playlist, you know what I'm saying? And that's that talk that I have with myself of it's okay to have a playlist with non-Christian music because it's not causing me to stumble, it's not causing me to go back and relive my wild oat days or anything like that. It's just music, right? And so, Michael and we're two different generations. I'm a Generation Xer. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and he's a baby boomer. He grew up in the 60s and 70s. He'd already done 2 tours in Vietnam by the time I was born. So, there are some generational differences there. Now, it works with us because we have the same values, and we have a lot of things in common, and we put God at the center of our relationship, and we let Him decide if a relationship between us was going to happen. It was something that we put some thought into, and I'm telling you all of that to say that even with God's blessing in there, we're still two different generations. Now, you don't have to know Him well to know, just by looking at Him and talking to Him, that there are going to be certain genres of music that He is not going to like. And it's not personal. It's not personal. There's going to be some genres that He is not going to understand, He's not going to be cool with, He's not going to listen. It's just not going to happen. Okay? And then you've got me over here. I was Wednesday Addams in high school, okay? I had the black lipstick, the black hair, all the things, right?
We need
And
pictures.
I'm gonna find some. I'm gonna find some so when I do my testimony, you guys can see that I'm telling the truth. Anyway, so one day, he had one of his heart doctor appointments, and he comes to the office, and we're gonna take my car, and I get the music, and I turn it up, and I'm on the way to work, right? To my jamming out to my songs, right? And so there's been a few times he's gotten in the car and my phone was connected and some songs came on and I was like, oh, and the faster you try to turn it off, the worse it gets, right? And so I already knew that he hated some of my music and we're not even going to talk about that, okay? And so this particular day, he was already not a happy camper. He was already, he had to go to the heart doctor, and they're telling him that he's going to die, and he's just not in a happy place, right? And Lord Jesus, of all the songs of all the songs that had to be played in that moment, why, Lord, did it have to be Tupac? But it was, and my fingers could not move fast enough, and it was just getting louder, and there was more gangster talk, and he just wouldn't stop, and he was just losing his mind. And anyway, it was a whole all the way to English. And why am I talking about that? What does that even have to do with being powerless? Well, I thought, I'm powerless in this situation. I have no control over how he responds. But that's not true. Because I knew that he did not care for me listening to that kind of music. And I did it anyway because I could. Now, is that a reflection for all of us when we think about powerlessness? Remember I said when you start doing your inventory, it's easy to list out all the things that were done to you as a victim, all the mean, hurtful things that happened. But when it gets to the part where you have to talk about the things that you've done, when I have to talk about the things that I've done, the list gets a little bit shorter and a little more scant. There's less detail because it's a lot easier to be the person that had things done to them than to be the person that did the things. That's where powerlessness comes into play. Let's go over the acrostic. Pride. Pride is a nasty one, and it can disguise itself as humility, but it's still pride. We start to see that we no longer are trapped by our pride when we acknowledge our powerlessness. Pride ends in a fall, while humility brings honor. Proverbs 29:23. Ignorance plus power plus pride equals a deadly mixture. We know that's accurate. Just look at Washington, D.C. Our false pride undermines our faith and it cuts us off from God and others. When God's presence is welcome, there's no room for pride because He makes us aware of our true self. Does anybody else have a hard time examining their true self? I mean, I do. There are things I know about me that I don't want to know about me. Next, we begin to lose the only ifs. So, for those of you that are note takers, P, pride. The next one is O, only ifs. Only if they hadn't walked out. Only if they hadn't left. Only if I had stopped drinking sooner. Only if I had done this instead of that. Only if I was more attractive. Only if I was more talented. If only. That is, it's circular. You're never ever going to get around that if it's only if. You can change nothing. How reluctantly the mind consents to reality, but when we admit that we are powerless, we start walking in the truth rather than living in the fantasy land of rationalization. Fantasy land is the place that I like to go when I want to avoid having to do anything of importance that's unpleasant. It's the privacy of my own mind. No one knows what I'm doing. I'm not drinking, I'm not drugging, I'm not being codependent, I'm not being counterdependent. I'm just avoiding the things that I don't want to do by escaping to the privacy of my own mind. I'm avoiding reality. Just because my outward actions don't appear negative or sinful or destructive or whatever, right? Everything might look good on the outside, but I'm still avoiding something that needs to be handled, right? Denial. Luke 12:2-3 tells us, whatever is covered up will be uncovered, every secret will be made known. So then whatever you have said in the dark will be heard in broad daylight. I cringe at the thought that when I stand before God, every word that's come out of my mouth, I will have to be accountable for. I cringe at that. It's why the one area that I've made significant progress in is keeping my pie hole shut when I'm ticked off. If I am mad, I'm not opening my mouth because that's a lesson that I've learned. And it doesn't mean there's not things happening on the inside, but I know Why? Because I had a slew of experiences where I got mad and I opened my mouth, and I can never take those things back. I can never undo the hurt I've caused by running my mouth when I'm angry. The next letter in Powerless is W, which stands for worrying. Now's a good time to worry. I mean, look around. We're living in crazy times. If you're ever going to worry, now seems like a reasonable time to worry. Except for we're not supposed to. It doesn't do any good. All the things that we're worried about will probably, most likely, never even manifest. Worrying won't buy you more time if you're on a time limit. It won't buy you better health. It won't fix your relationships. It won't get you a promotion. There's nothing that worrying will accomplish that will actually advance your situation. All worrying is a form of not trusting God enough. I've read that sentence 1,000 times, and it ticks me off just as much today as it does the first time I read it. You mean if I'm worrying, I'm not trusting God? No, I trust God. I trust Him so much that right now I'm thinking about how I can fix this problem I have without involving God. Because what? I have control issues. All worrying is a form of not trusting God enough. Instead of worrying about things we cannot possibly do or control, we need to focus on what God can do. Keep a copy of the Serenity Prayer in your pocket. Or just memorize it. That's a little bit more helpful. Commit it to your heart. By working the program and completing the steps, you can find that trust, that relationship with the only one higher power, Jesus Christ, so that the worrying begins to go away. Matthew 6:34 tells us, don't be anxious about tomorrow. God will take care of your tomorrow. Live one day at a time. Isn't that a recovery saying for all eternity, one day at a time, right? The next thing that happens when we admit we're powerless is that we quit trying to escape. That's the E. That's what brought most of us here, is our escape strategy was not working. Wow, life is really cruddy right now. You have a drink. Life's not going good. I'm feeling kind of down in the dumps. Let me have another hit. Life's crummy. Let me just look at some porn. You know, life's not awesome. Maybe I should try harder. Maybe I should work harder. Maybe I should embrace my perfectionism and run myself ragged trying to achieve things that aren't achievable. You know, there are some things that the world views as really positive character traits that are just toxic. Perfectionism. You are not perfect. I am not perfect. None of us will ever be perfect. Why would you run yourself ragged trying to be perfect? It's unachievable. Escape. Before we admitted we were powerless, we tried to escape and hide from our hurts, habits, and hang-ups. Many of us were probably trying to hide from not just hurts, but things that we didn't want to deal with, trauma, things that maybe we didn't know how to deal with them. You know, we could all come up with a list a mile long. Most of the things that we struggle with are because we're trying to escape something that we don't want to deal with or can't deal with or don't have the capacity to deal with. When we take this first step, God opens true escape routes to show His power and grace. For light is capable of showing up everything for what it really is. It's even possible, after all it happened to you, for light to turn the thing it shines upon into light also. Ephesians 5:13 and 14. Part of our recovery journey is coming into the light. It's not just that He's going to reveal the things in our life that need to be revealed so that we can work on them and be healed from them and overcome them. It shines light, I think, on a lot of things that maybe we didn't think were an issue. Does that make sense? Sometimes we get so caught up in the way of the world, we accept things that we shouldn't be accepting as normal, or accept things that maybe we shouldn't be accepting as appropriate. Religion. Jesus didn't come so we could have religion. He came so we could have relationship. Have we gotten caught up in religion and so wrapped up in that maybe we forgot the whole relationship part? And it's not just about our relationship with him, it's about our relationship with other people. How we interact with people makes a difference. And if there's no light involved in that, then we're missing something. The R in powerless stands for resentments. Resentments. I have had so many of those in my life, and I've had them for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes they're like a special little security blanket that I like to get out and wrap up and cuddle in and pet it and smell it. And, you know, my resentments. Nothing good has come of those resentments. If they are suppressed and allowed to fester, resentments can act like emotional cancer. I can tell you that there have been times in my life that I was emotionally cancerous. I was toxic. I was a miserable human being, and I didn't have to worry about managing friends because I had none. Because, you know, if you got too close, hey, let me just show you what a jerk I am so you can just step right away from me, okay? Self-sabotage. Because of my resentments. How come this person got this and I didn't? How come this happened to them and it didn't happen to me? How come this happened to me and it didn't happen to them? Why this? Why that? Resentments. Paul tells us in Ephesians 4:26 and 27, in your anger do not sin. He's not saying you can't be angry. Jesus got angry. There's nothing in the Bible that says we can't be angry. We're supposed to feel our emotions, right? We can't work through our emotions if we don't feel them. God's not saying you can't be angry. He's saying don't let your anger cause you to sin. Why I don't open my mouth when I'm angry? Because I will speak something that is not nice, that I can't undo. I can't unsay it. He's saying, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. Do not give the devil a foothold. What happens? Anybody in here ever been seriously ticked off about something and you went to bed on it? And do you have a comparison where you can take that time you dealt with it in the moment and the time that you went to bed angry and see a difference? Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
That what it's saying there is if you pack that anger away instead of dealing with it, then it becomes what? It becomes something that's going to cause you to sin later on.
Yeah.
Resentment.
Resentment. I mean, that's ultimately somehow or another what led us all here, right? Something we didn't deal with that we packed away, and it caused us to sin. And some people think, oh, well, you know, I'm codependent. That's not really sin. Oh, really? Are you giving up your own health and well-being to run around trying to save everybody?
Yeah, pretty much.
God's pretty clear about Him expecting us to take care of ourselves. So, just putting that out there. As you continue to work the principles, you'll come to understand that in letting go of your resentments, and by offering forgiveness to those who have hurt you, you're not just freeing the person who harmed you, you're freeing you. We will beat this to death later down the road when we get to that lesson. Forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. Remember Instagram chick? Mad because someone got healed? Mad. Mad because somebody got healed. Mad because how they intended to live the rest of their life was by being angry and miserable and not getting healed. On purpose. The forgiveness is not for them, it's for us. Now, if we try to maintain our false power, our false sense of, I know what's going on, but I got this. I'm in control, okay? I have everything under control. We become isolated and alone, and that's the L, and powerless. Loneliness. There is not any lonelier existence than being a counter-dependent person, where no one can get in your bubble, no one can get to know you, no one can get close to you, you can't get close to anyone, you self-sabotage, you keep people at arm's length, You don't allow people to get to know you. You don't even know you. That's what counterdependence is, and it's lonely. It's lonely because even in my counterdependence, having a relationship with God, I still couldn't have the relationship with God that I needed to have because I wouldn't let my walls down. It's God. I'm pretty sure he can handle whatever I have going on. Loneliness. When you admit that you're powerless and start to face reality, you'll find that you do not have to be alone. Has anybody ever experienced loneliness? It's a hard place to be. Loneliness is a choice. In recovery and in Christ, you never have to walk alone again. That is what this is about. We're not supposed to do this by ourselves. Even Christianity is not something that we do alone. It's something we do together. It's a team effort. It's about relationship. We don't have to be alone, and we're not supposed to be. The Bible's pretty clear that we're not supposed to forsake the fellowship. He's not just talking about coming to a building and singing some hymns and hearing a lesson. He's talking about having relationships with like-minded people, other believers, right? Because that's where our support comes from. God works through people. I mean, it'd be great if he just there was some light and he popped into the room and there was angels singing and he's like, hello, I'm here to save the day. Let me give you some words of wisdom. But that's not how he does things. His words of wisdom come through his word or through other people, right? Have you ever had a situation that you're dealing with and a stranger walks up to you into the store and they say exactly what you needed to hear and you don't even know them? That's not because the person's awesome, it's because they were obedient to God. We're not supposed to be doing this alone. Continue to love each other with true brotherly love. Don't forget to be kind to strangers, for some who have done this have entertained angels without realizing it. Hebrews 13:1 and 2. We're not supposed to do this alone. That's not how it was designed. When you admit you're powerless, you also give up another E, the emptiness. I can tell you that in all of my quests for perfection or, overachieving or whatever, there was never any real satisfaction in those achievements because the motivation was wrong. I've told you that I'm not an athletic person. Why in the world would I join the Marine Corps? Because it was an achievement. It was something I was trying to achieve. Not just to be independent and able to take care of myself, but because it was something that was hard that most people can't do. It was my quest to achieve things. And even when I achieved that, I didn't get the same kind of satisfaction that I would get if I was doing it for the right reason, such as when God directs us to do something, right? Is there anything more satisfying than God directing you to do something, doing it, and then seeing how it turns out? That's why we're here. Jesus said, my purpose is to give life in all its fullness, John 10:10. I've come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. So let him fill the emptiness inside. Tell him how you feel. He cares. I tell him how I feel. I even tell him how I feel when it's ugly. I get mad. I say exactly what's on my mind because you know what? He's not going to unfriend me on Facebook. He's not going to go and be like, hey, angels, guess what? Angel just, whoa. He's not like people. Selfishness. The S stands for selfishness. I've known people who have come into recovery thinking that the Lord's Prayer was, Our Father, who art in heaven, give me, give me, give me. They thought, he was like, bibbidi bobbidi boo, here you go. Here's your instantaneous healing, and look at how everything came together. And that's never how it works. I've seen instantaneous healing, but that's usually not how it happens. And I'm not just talking about physical stuff, I'm talking about emotional stuff. Usually doesn't happen. And why is that? Because we actually play a role in it, right? He is a gentleman, and he does things at our will, meaning he doesn't force himself into our situations. He doesn't force himself into relationship with us, right? Whatever we have with God is at our will. If we don't surrender our will, then he doesn't come into the situation, right? Some people talk about finding God, but he's not the one who's lost. Most of us are, even when we think we're on the right track, right? Separation from God can feel real, but it's never permanent. Remember, he seeks the lost. When we can't find God, we need to ask ourselves, who moved? He's pretty clear. He's never going to leave us or forsake us. There's nothing we can do that's going to drive him away from us. We can put him at arm's distance. We can be like, you know what, God, I don't even have time for this stuff right now. I want to do what I want to do, so you just need to go over there. And you know what? He'll be right over there. And maybe you'll have to deal with the natural consequences of your decision, or maybe he will extend grace to you and bring you out of it unscathed. Both happen all the time, don't they? I think I can at least say this about myself. There are plenty of times that I should have been dead. I don't see myself as some great asset to the kingdom, but he obviously has some kind of plan or I wouldn't be here, right?
Yes.
And that's true for everyone here. You don't have to be a Billy Graham for God to want to have a relationship with you, to want to use you, to make a difference, to impact people's lives, right? I think a lot of times about, those people that sing that not Christian music, the ones on my playlist. What would happen if, what is his name? Freddie Mercury. What would happen if Freddie Mercury had given his life to God and used that gift to bring people into the kingdom? Can you even imagine? What if Liberace? I mean, I'm not a fan, but you know what I'm saying. Some of those people who had these great talents, what if they had used those gifts to minister to people? Just something to think about. I'm convinced that nothing can ever separate us from his love. Death can't, and life can't. The angels won't, and all the powers of hell itself cannot keep God's love away. Nothing will ever be able to separate us from the love of God demonstrated by Jesus Christ when he died for us. There's nothing you can do to push him away other than to purposely push him away. But you know what? Even when you do that, if you invite him, he'll come back. He's not a grudge holder. I know. That's really the challenge when we're talking about our relationship with Jesus Christ, is to see him as God and not humans. Well, I'm wrapping it up, Phil. You guys can do what you need to do anytime. That's the difficulty, seeing God as God and not as human beings. Because human beings, essentially, can be kind of crappy. I mean, right? We've all experienced that with people. He's not the guy. There's nothing you can do to keep him from loving you and helping you and caring for you and all of those things. But it works best when you acknowledge your powerlessness and allow him to come in and actually make some decisions, actually influence the situation, actually be a part of it, right? So back to that whole powerlessness. I was not powerless in that whole saga of the music. I knew that it was displeasing to someone that I loved, and I chose to do it anyway because it made me happy, because I want. Selfish. I want what I want when I want it, which is now. Every time.
Okay, Violet.
I know, am I turning violet? I was not powerless because I had the information to make a good decision, and I chose to make a different decision, right? That's how it is with everything. Even the things that look too big, too complicated, too overwhelming, they're really just decisions. And if you don't want to make them, then bring God into the situation and He will help you make the right one. The right one is usually better than the not right one. Dear God, your word tells me that I can't heal my hurts, hang-ups, and habits by just saying they're not there. Help me. Parts of my life, or all of my life, are out of control. I know that I cannot fix myself. It seems the harder that I try to do the right thing, the more I struggle. The harder I try to turn that song off, the louder it gets. Lord, I want to step out of my denial into the truth. I pray that you show me the way. In Jesus' name. The power to change only comes from God's grace. Are you ready to begin your recovery journey? Are you ready to stop denying the pain, to stop playing God? That's ultimately what we're doing, right? I got this. Are you ready to stop playing God? Are you ready to start admitting your powerlessness? Now, for some of you, you've been working on all of these things for a long time, and maybe you don't need to address a whole bunch of stuff or a bunch of big stuff, but there's always stuff. And we become more usable and more relatable as we address even the things that are small. So even the things that we think, okay, I've dealt with all the big stuff. I have a few little character defects. Address them. By getting your own healing for that thing, by changing that thing that you think is little, it may save someone else's life. Because it's relatable to them. Are you ready to stop playing God? To start admitting that your life has become unmanageable? Share it with your group tonight. We're going to break out into small groups and sharing is what we do. Start working and living the program in earnest. Do it for real. Don't just go through the motions. We admit we're powerless. We need a power greater than ourselves to restore us. That's Jesus Christ. That's all I have for you guys.
Thank you.
Is there any prayer?